All right, part three, continuing on. We left off with discussing how Kusunokiru is a mixture of Genji and Six Secret Teachings and Sun Tzu's Tactics. Now we're going to jump to the servant, the house, and the son of heaven. There's not a whole lot to go into here that's not just put in this book. Basically, like I said, I've decided to translate. Instead of saying the clan, I've decided to go with house. Like, so instead of Fukushima clan, House of Fukushima, because I really want people to sort of understand the socio-political reality. I don't want them to think that it's a clan and that it's like a club. I want people to understand that this is a house, right? This is a socio-political reality. This isn't just, a group of friends or something. This is a political entity. It has political, legal, social implications. So the House of Fukushima. And so by going with House of instead of clan, I'm really trying to drive that point in. Because a lot of the readers, this is English, so a lot of the people reading this are going to, if not be Caucasian from a Western background, they're going to have, that still a Western background is going to be predominantly the dominating factor in their socio-political landscape. It's not guaranteed, obviously. I know some of the readers, may not be Caucasian from a sort of a Western socio-political religious background. However, the majority of readers will be. And even if you're not from that background, you've been influenced by that background, or your life has been touched by that background. So the point of what I'm trying to get at is I'm going with House of because that will be more meaningful. That will make sense more. You'll taste the reality more if I say House of Fukushima rather than Fukushima Clan. Because Fukushima Clan makes it sound like it's an organization, whereas in English, right? But if I say House of Fukushima, you realize that it's based on kinship, it's based on political realities, it's based on legal realities, inheritance issues, you know what I mean? Like, it's the house of such and such. It makes sense. You can taste that more. It's more familiar. So that's why I've gone with House of. And basically, this entire subchapter here is to just remind you that the structure is Tenno, noble, Bushi. Now, the Bushi are technically nobility, but they are the warrior nobility as opposed to the court nobility. Tenno, court nobles, Bushi. And the traditional function has almost always been the Tenno gives orders to the court nobles interpret that and reroute them to the Bushi. But then, as I say, the Genpei War changed that. The shogun becomes basically the court nobles are negated from the equation, and it's basically like the Bushi start to run the country. That's why Go Daigo want to do the Hokenmu restoration, because the warriors had sort of taken over the civil administration too. So it was like martial law, right? The military industrial complex. The military kind of was running everything, and he wanted to change that. So the key point here is that the Bushi's authority stems from the emperor. Now, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because you need to know how this works in order to understand that Southern Court mentality. And I talk about that on the next page over here, where I say Southern Court loyalists consider the only true service to the Tenno is service to the legitimate Southern Court emperor. Serving the Northern Emperor is not legitimate service. Therefore, it creates a unique ideology within the Southern Court loyalist. It's an ideology that allows espionage and clandestine behavior to thrive within the tactics. A Southern Court loyalist would have no issue with betraying one faction that was loyal to the Northern Emperor, if it meant moving the pieces of the political chessboard into an advantageous position for those serving the real emperor. So, like, for example, say a Bushi has always got to be loyal, but loyal to who? That loyalty must ultimately trickle back up to the Tenno. If you believe that the Tenno that your lord is serving is not the real emperor, then you are allowed to betray your lord. So this is a very interesting thing. All of these ideas of Bushido and all of this don't apply to Southern Court loyalists if we're talking about the chain of power leads up to a fake emperor. The Southern Court loyalists truly believe that the emperor on the throne, since he's a Northern Court descendant, he's not a legitimate emperor. And because he's not a legitimate emperor, the power flow that comes from him is not legitimate. And being illegitimate, there's no reason to give your loyalty or service to it. So therefore, you can betray this person. It's fine. He's not stemming from a true emperor. Now, if you betray somebody in relation to the real emperor, then yeah, you're breaking morality and you're breaking loyalty, etc., etc., etc. So in this way, then the Southern Court has to use conspiracy and play the chessboard of the Northern Court and the people that stem power from the Northern Court in order to actually serve the Southern Court. So, and that's why it says for the Southern Court loyalist, espionage and conspiracy was a sacred right, an act of Shinto. By betraying a lord or betraying somebody whose power is vested from the fake emperor, they're betraying them in order to put the Southern Court into a better position, that is actually considered virtuous. That is a sacred right. So that's why I'm saying it's important to understand like how this ideology plays out, because oftentimes, you will hear and you will read text where they say, oh, shinobis should not be deceitful or shinobis should not betray their lord. That's all from the perspective of somebody really who thinks like that their power, the power descent is authentic. But if you think the power descent is not authentic, if you think that if the society is flawed and the power is not properly flowing and mitigated, then all of those rules of social liability and social responsibility and stuff don't count. If the guy on the throne is not supposed to be there, then it doesn't matter if you are actually honor bound to not follow him. Right? Like, let's use a European example. If Prince John is on the throne, then it's Robin Hood's duty to not take shit from Prince John. Right? So fight that Sheriff of Nottingham and fight Prince John and hold out against those fakes until the real authority shows up, right? Now, I don't really know the real Robin Hood story. I'm going off of the children's book version. But the point is it's similar. It's like if the person on the throne isn't supposed to be there, then you don't take shit from him, and you don't take shit from the people that get their authority from him either. So that's a very specific Southern Court ideology. You don't really take shit from these people because the power's not stemming from a legitimate source. So that's important to understand, because then conspiracy doesn't become a dirty, dark secret that you have to keep in the back. Conspiracy becomes like an everyday thing, right? Because of course you're going to use and manipulate and shift and betray people that you don't feel there's really any reason to not do that to, right? So now we move into this next section, origin of Shinobi no Jutsu. Now, let me read this paragraph out. Shinobi no Jutsu is a large collection of various guerrilla and espionage techniques. Pinpointing a single origin is as impossible as it is grossly misrepresentative of the dynamic of Shinobi no Jutsu's existence. What that means is, Shinobi no Jutsu has such a dynamic existence. There's so many different versions. There's so many different definitions. There's so many different traditions. It is impossible and misrepresentative of its existence to try to pinpoint it to a single origin. Here's the flat truth. Ninjutsu does not have a single origin. There is no one point in history, one man that you can point to and say, that's where all ninjutsu comes from. Every school has their story, their creation story, whatever, but the creation stories don't match, right? Obviously. So they're stories, they're creation stories. And so the thing is, like, there is no single source for ninjutsu. It is a dynamic which formed over hundreds of years through various samurai houses, etc., etc., etc. So that's why I'm saying the reality is that it has no single origin point. Realistically, it's the result of dozens of traditions mingling among samurai houses of feudal Japan. Each of these traditions have an origin story, so therefore, rather than trying to find the origin of ninjutsu itself, which is irresponsible and impossible, look at the origin of each system individually. And so for Fukushima-ryu, very simple. The House of Nojiri created it upon the crest of Fukushima Masanori. That's simple. Lord Fukushima said, I want a ninja tradition. He actually, one of his chief retainers, we'll go into this later, but Kumazawa, I want a ninja tradition. And Kumazawa's like, okay, we can do that. Nojiri Narimasa, make it happen, right? So the House of Kumazawa, which is the House of Nojiri, same house, basically, Lord Fukushima said, I want a ninja tradition to be sort of founded and made. And then he's like, Kumazawa, get with it, get to it, crack on, get it done. And then so the Kumazawa, Morihisa, and Nojiri Narimasa put it together. So we'll discuss that later, though. Now, and we talked about, is there an alleged origin for the shinobi arts among the House of Nojiri, crafted from which the Fukushima-ryu was crafted? Is there an origin beyond Kusunoki-ryu in Southern Court? And I'll say, we know Kusunoki Masashige claimed to have gotten material from Chinese writing and Genji tactics. So we talked about the Genji tactics. We know the Chinese is Six Secret Teachings and Sun Tzu Tactics. What about the Genji teachings? Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, in the last part 2, I had talked about like the Hichitsui Kansho and Genji Yoshie and those teachings. Like the Genji clan has many historical documents predating Kusunoki Masashige which discuss warfare, magic, geomancy, geography, spying, da-da-da-da-da-da. So that I did not address in this book, but now I'm addressing it now in this sort of audio commentary. So that is there. Know that that's there. But, so that's there. So that's kind of answers the question. There we go. Boom. Right? There's a lot of Genji war material that predates Kusunoki Masashige. It's fairly certain this is where he's getting it from. But is there another tradition? Is there anything else that we would like to talk about? And that's what that's what this part is. Now, I put in black and bold letters here. I must warn the reader that what I'm about to present is oral tradition. I have no way to prove or back this up. As such, enjoy the story and understand it's oral tradition without documentation. Now, when I say it's oral tradition, I don't mean that it is a oral tradition of a specific Ryu that's been passed down to me. I'm not the inheritor of some ancient ninja Ryuha or whatever, right? Okay. When I say oral tradition, I just mean it's a story. It's a family story, right? So I need to be clear about that. Make sure everybody understands that. I'm not saying that this is a passed down lineage transmitted story. No, this is a family story. It's like you have family stories about grandpa, or you have family stories about great-great-grandpa. This is a story. So I guess it wasn't clear when I said oral tradition. I don't mean oral tradition of... This is not oral tradition of Fukushima-ryu. This is Stephen Nojiri's family story. So let's be clear on that. And I put that in here with this disclaimer. Okay, this story may or may not be legit. Okay, it's probably created hundreds of years after the alleged event in the story. I'm including it though because it's meaningful. The symbolism and spiritual significance of the story is meaningful within the grand context of the book. That's why I'm presenting it. It is the origin of ninjutsu is found in the secret arts, which is Hijitsu, passed to Genji Yorimitsu by Hachiman Daibosatsu. This was used in the beginning to rescue hostages and kill enemies defending secure locations. Later, it was adapted into ninjutsu. This is known as the Hachiman Daibosatsu tradition, or Hachiman Daibosatsu Den, right? The tradition of Hachiman Daibosatsu. This is also important because this took place allegedly this took place in the 1990s. And I won't go through the story. The story is here, right? You can read the story. It took place in the 1990s. Genji Yorimitsu's in his 40s. What's interesting is it's around this same time, that Genji Yoshie is also, I believe it's around the same time, that Genji Yoshie is also kind of making a name for himself too. So it's the late 900s and then the early thousands, so it's like between 950 and 1150, you have many Genji that make a name for themselves doing sort of amazing military feats. And it's from these guys that are doing these feats that then later on people like Kusunoki Masashige would be reading their manuals, reading their diaries, and then developing strategies from those. So, whether or not Genji Yorimitsu, had this vision, and whether this really happened or not, or whether really there was Hijitsu passed down, whatever, in the end, Genji Yorimitsu was a sort of a military brilliant tactician, a military hero, a warrior hero. He would, and his techniques and his life and his memory would definitely be, if nothing else, inspiration for Kusunoki Masashige, right? If nothing else. But now this story says that, now there is a story now, there's a popular folklore called the story of Shuten Doji. That's beyond question. We know this story. The fictional storybook version of this is there. And allegedly, this event really happened. So we have alleged real event, which now has a storybook kind of folk tale about it existing. The question here is, in this version, is really just kind of the normal version, right? But it's the key point here is that Hachiman Daibosatsu gave Yorimitsu Hijitsu. That's the key point here. Now, did that happen? Did that not happen? There's no way for me to tell you yes or no. I have no idea. That's the story. And then from that Hijitsu, and that explains, it's all, you read this, it's all in here, From that, and then there's a connection to Amitabha. So there's now again, the connection to Amitabha, is that connection to Amitabha added later? Probably. Probably. But I mean, that's the way the story goes, is that Hachiman Daibosatsu is like an expression of Amitabha and told Genji Yorimitsu, to use Hijitsu, use what would basically be the forerunner to ninjutsu, use like these secret arts of disguising yourself and creeping in and da-da-da-da-da, basically for the purpose of rescuing, in this case for rescuing captives, right? And then these arts would later on become ninjutsu. So it's not saying that the Hachiman Daibosatsu Den is a ninja tradition. It's saying that it's a tradition of Hijitsu. And then that tradition of Hijitsu would later become a tradition of Shinobi no Jutsu. So anyway, there's like I said, I put this in the book because I'm trying to flesh out the context around everything involved. So there's this story of Genji Yorimitsu and this vision of Amitabha / Hachiman Daibosatsu, and this whole idea of use Hijitsu, because like I say in here, the world, there's too much warfare in the world, and warfare it comes from the Asuras, and then you have to basically, use Hijitsu to preempt warfare. And the whole point, the preempting of warfare, this is a very key point, because you will see this idea pop up as a real important concept in Sun Tzu's Tactics, and in this Hachiman Daibosatsu Den origin story, and also in the Fukushima manual itself. There's a line that really specifically harps on the preemptive conspiracy. So the point of the matter is, even if this story is 100% just made up, hundreds of years later it's made up, that's ultimately irrelevant. The point is its symbolism. I included it because of its symbolism. The symbol, because the thing is, like I said, what happened is after the Sengoku period, it was very, very common for people to to make up origin stories for different traditions. Like we saw that in the Iga and Koga scrolls. All of a sudden Chikamatsu was saying that they go back to like Susanoo, you know, putting the comb in his hair and stuff like that, right? So, or it goes back to a particular, you know, bird appearing and doing something, or it goes back to this particular prince who did this, you know. Does it really go back to those things? Honestly, probably not, okay? But it's meaningful to people. So it's like, I made a video on that once. It's the difference between the forensic reality and the socio-cultural reality. Forensically, that probably never happened, okay? But socio-culturally, it happened. From a symbolic reality, it happened, right? And so therefore, that's how I included it in the book. Symbolically, it's important because the story provides I hate to use the word myth. I really hate to use the word myth, but that might be helpful to the listener, you know, like a mythological sort of background. And then that mythology sort of encompasses all of the values and the view of the system or of the ideology, and then displays it, right? So the story could have been created, you know, way late, you know, after this. Like the story could have been created like much sooner, much closer to our time in history, right? Like, you know, if the story's true, it took place in 1990. It could have been made up like in the 1600s or 1700s or whatever. You know what I mean? It could have been, this story, it could have been, but the point is it beautifully encompasses the view and the values. So that's why it's included in here. Yeah, so now we've sort of, hopefully part 1, part 2, and part 3 is really helping to clarify and sort of get you ready to really now talk about the Fukushima. Now we've sort of discussed the foundation. We've sort of discussed, and we really haven't gone into detail. The book, plus me yammering on for an hour and a half, is really just only providing you the most basic grounding. But now, hopefully, with the book and with me going on for you know, an hour and a half, you have some kind of grounding that you can now say, okay, I think I got an idea of the background for what's about to happen. Because now from here on out, we're going to be talking directly about Fukushima-ryu and Kusunoki-ryu's involvement and the history of the Fukushima clan and the House of Kumazawa and the Nojiri line and da-da-da-da-da-da. So that's all coming up. But first we have to kind of make sure that you read the book and you listen to this and that you have an idea of, okay, now I have some idea of the background. Because the context is really, really important. Because once you have the context, everything else from here on out is going to make more sense once you have the context.